Hey, welcome back to Pop Culture Graveyard. I am Hollis, and today I want to bring you one of my all-time favorite albums, Marquee Moon by Television. This is a debut album that comes across as a sure-footed masterpiece by a veteran band. That's perhaps due to the fact that the band had been playing live for a few years before they even got a record deal. This album would prove to be more important to other music scenes than to the one that spawned it, given its crisp guitar tones, its use of space, and its lyrical imagery. Marquee Moon became very popular in Britain, where the first post-punk bands were already trying to find their footing. I don't want to overstate how good this album is, so I'll simply call it the best punk rock guitar album of all time. Was that too much? Join me for a celebration of Television's brilliant masterpiece, Marquee Moon. Before we begin, I want to give a quick shout out to my newest patron, Jim Murphy. Thank you, Murph. I appreciate the support. If you would like to support the channel and get a shout out, please visit my Patreon at patreon.com/popculturegraveyard. On with the show. Let's hit it. Television are responsible, more than any other band, for the thriving CBGB's punk scene of the early 70s. They were the first to find Hilly Crystal's club on the Bowery, the first to ask him to play a residency there, and you could in lots of ways say that CBGB's was the stage that Television built. No, seriously. The band helped to build the club's actual stage. Though they were the first band on the CBGB's music scene, Television was one of the last bands to get signed and put out an album. Television is Tom Verlaine on lead vocals and guitar, Richard Lloyd on guitar and backing vocals, Fred Smith on bass and backing vocals, and Billy Fica on drums. The music that wound up on Marquee Moon began to really come together once bassist Richard Hell was ousted from the band. That's right, my beloved Richard Hell. You guys kicked me out! Can you believe that? Richard's bouncy, haphazard style of playing was heavy on theatrics and light on musicianship. His replacement, Fred Smith, who the band stole from an early incarnation of Blondie, was as solid and steady as Hell was loose and erratic. Songs that the band had been playing for a couple of years, such as Venus de Milo and Marquee Moon, suddenly came alive as the band's two guitarists were able to stretch out and expand upon musical ideas as they never had before. After a couple of years of auditions for and false starts with various record labels, most notably Island Records, the band finally signed with Elektra. By that time, Television had already put out a single by themselves, Little Johnny Jewel, on manager Terry Ork's label, Ork Records. So Television already knew how they wanted their album to sound. Elektra agreed to let Tom Verlaine produce the album himself, provided that he hire a veteran producer to work with him. Speaking of which, if you ever think a reviewer is overemphasizing the jazz leanings of Television, I want you to keep in mind that Tom Verlaine's first choice of producer for this album was Rudy Van Gelder, the legendary jazz producer. Rudy was unavailable, and part of me really wants to hear what Rudy would have recorded. So Television settled on Andy Johns, whose work with the Rolling Stones, most famously on Exile on Main Street and Goat's Head Soup, really impressed the band. When Andy showed up and heard the band's music, he honestly had no idea why such a clean-sounding art rock outfit wanted a raunchy rock and roll engineer. They had to explain that he recorded some of the best rock guitarists of all time, and that this was a serious guitar album. Marquee Moon was recorded in September of 1976 at A&R Studios, which was master producer Phil Ramone's personal studio at 48th Street. Phil Ramone is the R in A&R Studios. The Velvet Underground, John Coltrane, and Bob Dylan had all recorded there. So there's some seriously nice musical juju in those walls. It only took a few weeks to record the album, very quick by 70s standards, and on February 8th, 1977, Marquee Moon was released. Album opener, See No Evil, is a brilliant way to kick off this album, given that it's Television at their most rock-oriented. The song is solely credited to Tom Verlaine, but it really should have been co-credited to Verlaine and Lloyd, as Richard totally came up with the guitar part he plays all by himself. All Tom had was the guitar part that goes da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da. Then Richard comes in with the wonderful guitar flourish that truly makes the song unique. Richard argued the authorship point for years, but didn't have the endurance to successfully fight Tom for credit. Sidebar for a moment. Here's something that may unlock the dynamics of the band for you. When Television got signed to Elektra, Tom Verlaine tried to get the label to sign him alone as Television, and all the other members of the band as his sidemen. Elektra wouldn't go for that and said, no, we want the whole band. as television, but it gives you a little bit of an insight into Tom's thought process regarding television and the authorship of the songs. See No Evil marks the first of Richard Lloyd's solos on this album, and he pulls this one off with a furious beauty. These songs all have so many beautiful touches, you might not realize them the first 2 or 3 or dozen times that you listen to them. During the part of the song that goes, "I understand all destructive urges, they seem so perfect," check out the jazzy little double time flourishes that Billy is playing underneath it. The outro to this song is just perfect, as the band seldom had better backing vocals, and the fade out simply rides them to the finish line. I believe this song is about how an artist creates his own moral universe, and that the song's narrator is simply following his instincts, regardless of the good or bad definitions that others put on his actions. And plenty of normals at the time this was released definitely saw the young people in the downtown music scene and their live for today recklessness as being straight up evil. Production mix wise, See No Evil sets a really good tone for the rest of the album. The rhythm section of Billy and Fred are in the middle, while Tom is in the left channel and Richard is in the right. That's pretty much spot on perfect mixing and the way that you want to hear this album. This is one of those rare punk albums where it sounds even better if you listen through your headphones. Next song, Venus de Milo, is one of the band's signature tunes ever since they made their first legendary run at CBGB's, and it's hard to imagine them doing a better job of it than they do here. Perfect separation of instruments, crisp, clear production, the band could not be tighter, and the song is one of the most forward-thinking of its time. Say what you want about Tom Verlaine, the man is a poet, and Venus de Milo is one of his crowning achievements. The song, at its core, is about how love is a drug, and that drug makes you feel good when it comes on, and it even makes you feel good when it goes, because it leaves you more mature than you were before. And so when your best friend and your occasional frenemy, Richie, comes along and asks you to dress up like cops and cut loose, you're old enough to know better. There's no going back to childishness. Speaking of the Richie, aka Richard Hell, mentioned in the song, given how methodically Tom Verlaine slowly erased Richard Hell from television, first telling him not to move on stage, then cutting all his songs except for Blank Generation, then cutting Blank Generation, and forcing Richard to leave the band. I'm always shocked when I hear Hell mentioned in the lyrics. Then Richie said, "Hey man, let's dress up like cops, think of what we could do." But something said, "You better not." I would have thought Verlaine would have dropped even this brief mention of Hell from the song. But I suspect by now Tom already knew the song was pretty iconic, and that NYC audiences loved the mythology of the song, and were so intrigued by the love-hate relationship of the two NYC idols, that Richie's name by now was integral to the song. Richard Lloyd effortlessly doubles his guitar part, and its complicated melodies and filigrees, as he shows time and time again his propensity for uncanny double tracking throughout this album. By the way, getting back to the song's Love is a Drug theme, Tom Verlaine was super pissed when Roxy Music's Siren album was released, because he feels they ripped off the songs on Marquee Moon, from various guitar lines to bits of lyrics, to turning Venus de Milo's subject into a song, Love is the Drug. His case is solid too, because Roxy Music was on Island Records, and it's well known that A&R man Richard Williams played the unsold Brian Eno television demo to all of the bands on the Island label. Everybody, I just want to talk to Brian Ferry alone for a minute. I know what you did. The next song, Friction, is one that should really be credited to Lloyd and Verlaine, being that Richard came up with the main line of the song. And according to Richard, the opening part to Friction is based on the tempo of a German polka band, or an oompa band. Think about that next time you listen to it. A borderline garage rocker, Friction is perhaps the closest the band comes to a straight-up song about sex. One line is delivered as, "I start to spin the tale, you complain of my dick shun. You give me friction, but I like friction." That's just sexy. There's an amazing guitar attack that happens towards the end of the song. And I hesitate to call it a guitar duel because Richard and Tom's guitars interlock so well, and I really adore Billy's stagger step drumming to end the song. If you're curious about Marquee Moon, but you like really heavy rock and you think this might be a little too arty for you, check out Friction first. If you like Friction, then start at the beginning with See No Evil and listen to the whole album. I really think friction will hook you. This brings us to the title track, Marquee Moon. All these years later, Marquee Moon is still my favorite track on this album. Like most of the songs on this classic album, the epic title track took a long meandering road to get to the perfected version that you hear on this LP. For those of you who are curious about the song, I'm going to put links to a few early versions in the descriptions below. Just to give you an idea of the song's evolution, there was an early ramshackle version that was recorded at manager Terry Ork's loft. That's way more in keeping with the early punk vibe of the early CBGB scene. Then there's a slightly more polished demo version, taped by Brian Eno and A&R man Tony Williams in 1974. That's right, 1974. I told you they were one of the last bands to get a record deal. Then there's a slightly more polished demo version. Richard Hell is still in the band. He's still playing his thundering bass. And to be honest, that version is fantastic, if you love the sound of the Velvet Underground. And who doesn't? But it's a far cry from the sound that Tom Verlaine had in his head for the song. Then there's a tape of the band at CBGB's in 1976, with Fred Smith in the band, and you can finally hear the song in all its glory. Not far different from what you hear on this record. That the final recorded version is so beautifully captured, especially Tom's lead vocals, which were always hit or miss live. It is the audio equivalent of capturing lightning in a bottle. For such a legendary song, Marquee Moon starts out very unassumingly, with Tom Verlaine strumming a B minor 4 times, then strumming a D5 4 times, over and over, almost like a masterful boxer just lulling you to sleep before unleashing his true fury. Then Richard Lloyd interrupts with his double-stop guitar flourish, simultaneously completing Tom's guitar thoughts and ratcheting the song's tension up a notch. Fred's funky bass smooths out the abrasiveness of the guitars, while Billy's unpredictable drum flourishes keep you off balance. From that moment on, you're hooked. And for the next 10 minutes or so, time seems to stand still, as the band takes you on a journey in which you're happy to lose yourself. I believe this song is about a deep depression, and how no matter how much you fight against it, or involve other people in it for a momentary escape, you always end up right back in its clutches. The two soloists are rather easy to tell apart. For one thing, Richard Lloyd solos like a classic rock guitarist. He learned from a friend who learned from Jimi Hendrix. Not years after. This guy would go to Hendrix's house, learn from him, immediately go to Lloyd's house, and teach him what Jimi just taught him. Tom, on the other hand, comes from left field and plays his solos with a free jazz sensibility. And he frets his instrument almost like a sitar player. And the two guitar styles complement each other perfectly. Tom Verlaine solos for about 5 minutes. It's an amazing, meandering, off-kilter solo that somehow never overstays its welcome. Richard gets a smaller solo, but no less effective. At around the 7-minute mark, the two guitarists sound almost as if they're beginning to climb up a hill. This continues for just over a minute, where they begin stabbing at the song, and then suddenly everything explodes. And you can almost hear shimmering glitter falling down from the sky as keyboards and guitars twinkle and glisten, and then everything slowly fades away. But that's not where the song ends. Marquee Moon, on these original pressings, which have the classic Electra butterfly design, clocks in at 9:58. And guess what? That's not the long version. You'll need to get a later pressing to have the full 10-minute, 35-second version. Hey, when Marquee Moon was played live, it was even longer. Some versions went 15, 20 minutes. So it's good to have a later pressing just so you can have the entire recorded version in its entirety. But getting back to the original album, which by the way comes with a nice lyric sheet, the back of which has a picture of the band rehearsing in Terry Ork's loft. So on the original version of Marquee Moon, the song explodes, everything fades, there's silence, and then the song slowly starts up again and comes rallying back. And then Verlaine begins singing another verse. And then the song fades out again, this time for good. I guess the band wanted you to know that the song was longer, and if you went out and saw them live, you'd get all of it. But as is, they missed a beautiful opportunity to slowly fade the song after it explodes with that gorgeous wind chime-like crescendo, which feels inevitable when it happens, given the tension the band built throughout the song. That's when I would have ended it. But who might have questioned television? The next song is Elevation, and if you're saying to yourself, gee, that guitar solo sounds fat and delicious, it's because Richard Lloyd double-tracked it, playing that guitar solo twice. It is Richard's favorite solo on this album. Richard has said that he likes to imagine Jimi Hendrix and Jimmy Page looking over his shoulder when he plays a solo, saying, no, that's not quite it, no, that's not it. When he played the solo on Elevation, he could hear them saying, yep, that's it. Lyrically, the song is as poetic as anything Patti Smith ever put out. She is my measuring stick for rock poetry. And its musical grandeur is a reminder that Tom co-wrote the gorgeous Break It Up with Patty on her seminal Horses album. Tom and Richard absolutely kill it on Elevation. At points in the song when you momentarily are catching your breath from the stunning guitar work, you'll suddenly be able to hear what Fred Smith is doing underneath the twin guitarists. And without Fred's solid support, the dueling guitarists wouldn't have even ground to play upon. Elevation is my favorite Tom Verlaine vocal performance on this album. Lyrically, this song is set on the waterfront, and its poetry really eludes definition, but it could be a sort of love song to Manhattan Island, where Tom Verlaine was able to reinvent himself as a musician, yet he's careful not to get caught up in the ego trip that many celebrated bands fall prey to. Elevation even sounds a lot like television, the way Verlaine sings it. The lines in the song that seem to reference another person could again be mentioning his complex relationship with Richard Hell. Regardless of the song's meaning, it's another brilliant composition. And I love the ending to Elevation. 5 notes that finish the song abruptly, yet perfectly. The song Guiding Light has an almost religious sound to it, as if the music is coming down from on high, and the lyrics do nothing to shake me from that spiritual feeling. The song lends itself to various interpretations. It's either a song about a couple divorcing, or about a solitary figure walking blindly through the trials of life while a divine hand guides him. What I do know is that Tom Verlaine's Never the Rose Without the Prick comes 11 years before Poison's Every Rose Has Its Thorn. Incidentally, Guiding Light is the only song on here credited to both Richard Lloyd and Tom Verlaine, as Richard was determined to not let what happened on See No Evil happen again. He fought hard for that co-authorship for the guitar part that he came up with. Richard told Tom, either you write another guitar part for this, or give me the credit for this one. Tom tried, but no other guitar part seemed right, and so Richard got his co-credit. Guiding Light was the first of 2 newer songs written for this album. The song Prove It has an upbeat pulse to it, with a plot that comes right out of a Raymond Chandler pulp novel. The song stops and starts a couple of times, playing with the rhythm until it twists into something halfway between doo-wop and reggae. Billy's jazz flourishes add just the right kind of sloppy touches. And by the time Tom Verlaine launches into his solo, you're already staggering at how tight this band is. The fact that Tom then plays one of his best solos on the album only adds to that overwhelming feeling. Incidentally, the band recorded Prove It while Andy Johns was asleep, actually face down drunk in the control booth with his head on the soundboard. When the band very loudly played back the song in the booth to hear it, Andy woke up startled and said, "Did I record this?" They were like, "Yeah, Andy, you did a good job, man. You're killing it." That is the take you hear on this album. The next song, Torn Curtain, is every bit as cinematic as the Hitchcock film of the same name. But unlike that film, this song won't put you to sleep. This was the second newer song recorded for the album, along with Guiding Light. And it's a long one. The title track has the reputation for being the long song on this album. But Torn Curtain is no slouch, clocking in at 7 minutes. The guitars are perhaps more restless than they had been on all the songs prior, alternating between shrieking and stabbing, between reaching majestic heights and dive bombing. Honestly, the guitars convey as much passion as the lyrics, which is saying something. You can hear Verlaine on keyboards, which both fleshes out the song as well as adds extra emotion. I believe the song deals with a lover's betrayal, a betrayal so profound that even the years that came before are tainted as well, and the song's subject just wants to burn it all down. It's a real gut-wrencher of a song, and Torn Curtain brings down the curtain on this album with real pathos. This album was greeted eagerly by critics who loved it, but here in America, people just weren't buying this album. However, no one can take away what an amazing achievement Marquee Moon is. It's that rarest of much talked about albums, in that it lives up to all of its considerable hype, and exceeds even your highest expectations. I'll be putting links below to a lot of live stuff, but if you want to own some live television, I highly recommend Live at the Old Waldorf. This is the band killing it in San Francisco in 1978. They're touring the Adventure album, but they do 3 numbers from Marquee Moon: Venus, Friction, and Marquee Moon. This was put out by Rhino Handmade back in the day. I used to get everything that Rhino Handmade put out, and this is stellar as usual from them. Do me a favor, if you enjoyed this episode, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. I will see you next week with a lot more cool stuff.